And welcome to all of you for our coming to our second Lunch and Learn series. And we're going to talk about economic development. Bringing home the bacon is the theme. So you're eating some bacon. That's about all we can do with that, but we'll get into it today. We really, economic development is let's just say it, it's a controversial issue, right? You probably have burning questions right now. You came in here and you're going to ask us, and we have a sheet of paper for you to write them down so you don't have to think about what you're going to ask, so you can maybe hear what we're going to say a little bit. And then maybe we'll have some time. We've got a lot to cover today. But, City of Bryan for the last, I'm going to say 25 years, has been very aggressive on, I'll say, compared to other communities in the area of economic development. We call ourselves pro-development, but also, we have to balance, growth with quality of life and what is best for our community long-term. Sustainable is the word that's used a lot. But we're going to get into some of these concepts today. We're going to, again, talk about a number of things today. I want to introduce our team, though, because, and I did the math just now, between the three of us right here, there's 63 years of City Bryan experience here. But Kevin Russell, and I'm going to also point out our friend and colleague, Mr. Dennis Gehring. He's here today, and he was actively involved in economic development in Bryan, College Station, Texas A&M, Aggie Land for more. Well, actually, I don't know if I'm going to say 63 years, but I'm not going to put a number to it. But many of you know his efforts. I'm going to introduce Kevin Russell, and he'll come up in a moment. We're going to hand off different parts of the presentation. Kevin is our Economic Development Director as well as our Development Services Director. Kevin has been here almost 25 years, right? And we're going to talk about a 25-year window today, because when we talk about economic development, it's a long-term investment. We're going to look back at what this community looked like in 1990. This is 2015. It's hard to believe that's been 25 years ago. I moved here 25 years ago. My wife and I moved here 25 years ago. We're celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary in July, and I started as an intern here. But let me get to these folks before I get to myself. So Kevin's going to speak a little bit. He's in charge again of our development area and a number of other things, duties as assigned, right? Yep. Lindsay Gindy is our Director of Special Projects. She is Strategic Projects, excuse me. She has been a vital part of our team as far as a planner by background. Has been here for 15 years this coming year, and we were just reflecting recently that she started the day after 9/11. But anyway, a significant day in history. But she's left her mark, I can tell you right now, on the City of Bryan, and does major work for the City of Bryan Council and working through projects, a number of economic development initiatives. So she's going to present. She's an expert on a number of areas, particularly tax increment financing, TIRS or TIFs. So she's going to go through that for you as well. So I'm just going to go pretty quickly here, and we're going to tell you what we're going to cover. We're going to try to define economic development. That's a difficult thing to do. And I can tell you that really changes for every community that you go to. Each community has to sort of define itself what economic development means for that community. But I have made a general statement that Bryan is very much involved and has been involved in economic development initiatives in the Bryan-College Station area. I will say very much so over the last 25 years. More intense, I would say, over the last 10 to 15 years. Again, we have some examples we'll go through. Who are the players, who's involved directly and indirectly in economic development initiatives? Obviously our City Council, but I'll go through a lot of other entities that are involved and partners with the City of Bryan. I'll talk about, and Lindsay will take over here and talk about the tools that are used, commonly used, both here as perhaps other cities, but what's really worked for the City of Bryan, what tools are in place, what kinds of agreements, and how they're structured. And then we're going to dive into some examples. And again, we want to hit the high points, but we also want to give you opportunity to ask some questions, okay? So let me just talk a little bit about what defines economic development for the City of Bryan. And I mentioned some of these terms already, but sustainable growth. Economic development is great, but it's not about one deal. It's not about one development, and it's not about one-time development. It's about how do we sustain positive growth over a period of time. Again, that's why we're going to a 25-year window when we start talking about where we've been and where we're going. We look at long-range plans. Lindsay and I are trained as long-range planners. And as a matter of fact, little plug here, we're in the middle, halfway through our comprehensive plan effort right now for the City of Bryan. And we'll give you some information on this later, but we're going to be holding a public meeting that you're all welcome to come to as well on the 14th of April at Anson Jones Elementary at 6 p.m. But we're halfway through that effort, and that's a long-range plan, and it has a number of elements related to economic development. But here's some other things that relate to it. The creation of jobs, not just any jobs, but the quality of jobs, the types of jobs, raising that standard. There's what kind of jobs come into your community. We need a diversity of types of jobs, but we want to raise that type of job level, if you will. We talk about the types of jobs that we try to attract. So again, that not just the number of jobs, but better jobs and better opportunities for career advancement. We live in a college town. We're neighbors to a world-class university, and talent comes through here and rotates out every year. We want to find ways to keep them here, but we're finding companies and entities want to move to this community because of the quality of life, but because they want to leverage that talent that's already here, that's already living in our community. We want those folks to stay here and find opportunity. It's about tax base growth over time. If you're not growing your tax base, you don't have resources to thrive as a community. We'll get into it in a moment, but cities must have revenues in order to provide services, basic services, police, fire, public works, other basic service cities provide, and you have to have growth in order to sustain those things. Those things don't just stay level in cost. Costs go up every year. So growth, economic development feeds growth, and that growth is vital for basic services the city provides. Retention. A lot of times communities, the whole effort is to attract other business. Well, what about the tax-paying businesses that are here now? What do they get? That is always an element that has to be part of an economic development initiative. Is what are we doing to not only meet the needs of current businesses, but how do we help them grow and thrive? And of course, diversification. We are, like I said, we are a college town, but we also need to be dependent on a number of different industries. In Bryan, we have a number of industries in addition to, again, being highly dependent on government or higher education. We're privileged to have Bryan-College in our community, and they're expanding, and we'll talk about that. But again, that opportunity is great, and we leverage that, but then what can we do to add other elements to our community? Many communities in the Texas area are very oil and gas dependent, and so they don't have a diverse economy, if you will. When that oil and gas price goes up and down, we like to see it it's going up a little bit, so it's getting better, but we see an effect from that. But if we're diversified in our economy with different companies or different types of employment, then we don't have those same dips. In any industry, it doesn't matter what it is, because all of them do fluctuate. And then finally, quality of life. How do you define that? That's also part of our strategic plan for the city. But how do you define that? Well, again, that's hard to. We're going to try to do that today, and we've got some. We have a video at the end of this presentation that we believe will illustrate to you visually what we mean, with the impact that economic development has on quality of life. So let me just walk you through some principles and concepts. As I mentioned, every community. Am I at the right screen? Yeah. Every community has its own set of challenges and opportunities, or we call it SWOT, opportunities and threats, strengths, weaknesses. But every community needs to craft its own mission. Again, I'm very proud, and again, I think Kevin and Lindsay will talk about this. We're very proud of the continued commitment by the City of Bryan, not just the current City Council, but multiple City Councils over a period of years, in their commitment to economic development initiatives. Downtown Bryan, we're going to talk about that one, but that's sustained over time. But having goals and objectives, having a mission, it's always being tweaked, and local conditions always change. But it's so important that there is a set of objectives and actions strategically done that will meet, not just meet needs, but really to leverage what is unique about your community. And again, we've got a lot to offer in our location here in Central Texas. Call it the Texas Triangle. That's the major metro areas of the city, of Texas. Not the city, but of Texas. It's all going to be one city at some point, right? That's what they say. But the Houston, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, the San Antonio, Austin, and we're right in the middle. So we're strategically located, and again, having that proximity is a good thing. No single catch-all formula works for every community. It's not a one-size-fits-all exercise when you define what your mission is as economic development. It has to have both a public and a private element to it. Government can't do economic development in a vacuum by itself. And again, when we talk about the partners involved, it has to involve, if it doesn't translate to growth on the private sector side, it fails. It is a waste of taxpayer dollars, quite frankly, if it doesn't have those kinds of results. This is a term that we've used, and it actually comes, and I'm not an attorney, so if you're an attorney, you can correct me on this, but the but-for test is actually a legal term, and it basically refers to cause and effect, and had to do with accidents. That accident wouldn't have happened if someone didn't run a red light. Okay, well that's sort of the term. Well, for economic development, the but-for test is a critical question to ask about any economic development agreement or incentives that it might be considered for a development. If not but for that incentive, if not but for that effort, whatever that is, this development will not come. Now, I know what you're thinking, because everybody has an opinion, right? You can always look back and say, well, that'd come anyway. Or maybe it had been something else, maybe it had been better. But that is always, and that's an item of debate, certainly. But that is always the question, and that answer has to be no. The answer has to be no. If not, but for, it won't happen. Well, again, you have to do, and that's what the staff's here for, and that's what council has other resources to help make those types of decisions, and they're tough decisions. And again, some of them don't work, quite frankly, and we'll talk about a couple of them in our examples. But I'm proud to say that a number of them have worked and are paying dividends today. Again, that's a question that has to be asked in the front of any kind of economic development initiative. We're here today to talk about economic development, but local government, but at all levels of government, any entity that's involved in economic development that is stewards of taxpayer dollars, of public dollars in any way, needs to be transparent. There's also sensitivity about how do you make a deal work with an entity, perhaps a private entity that doesn't want to reveal who they are. So that's always a sensitivity. But again, at the bottom line is the city has to be accountable to the taxpayers, to you. We are accountable to you, and I think all who are involved in economic development, that's a critical element of a successful program. And finally, and this is similar to the transparency, and that is ongoing monitoring and compliance. How did those projects do? We don't just do a deal and we're done with that and we don't even look at it again. No, it's critical that they're looked at throughout the, both during the period of compliance per se, as well as after, how those companies or initiatives doing years down the road. And we'll talk about some of those. Our strategic plan for the City of Bryan includes what we call a strategic initiative for development, for economic development. We have 5 main areas, but one of those 5 is economic development. Just read it real quick. Bryan is an economically diverse and thriving community, reaching out to both new and existing businesses. It's not a lengthy one. That's fine. It doesn't have to be, but it does tell you, again, we want to take care of our own. We also want to bring new growth in. It's really a challenge of doing both. So we need to be fair and equitable, right, how we deal with that. And then we had several what we call key results areas, and we can provide this to you. I know it's on our website as well. The City Council's adopted these basically strategic initiatives several years ago, but these are the ones that we operate under. Again, there's a general citywide economic development objectives. You'll see partnerships. Again, that's all about partnerships. I've already talked about that, and I'll go through some of these entities. Brazos County, Texas A&M. The RVP is the Research Valley Partnership. BBC, it is not British Broadcasting Company. It's Bryan Business Council. And then St. Joseph's Hospital is another one. Assist in the creation of new jobs. I mentioned that already. Current business, aid and expansion. And then residential development. Many people don't think of residential as an element in economic growth. It is. If you're not, and along those same lines is your partnership with the school district. You know, people, when you grow as a community, you have to make sure you focus on the ways that make it easy for residential development to occur, but quality residential to occur in the community. And then we have some goals and objectives the council adopted for our Bryan Business Council. The Bryan Business Council is actually a separate entity that is, I guess it's on 501c3, 506c6, okay. Entity that owns and actually manages property for business park development, the Bryan Business Park on the north end of town. But they also advise the city council on economic development initiatives of all types. They mainly focus on retail and other types of jobs. The Research Valley Partnership, on the other hand, focuses on more of the industrial, or what we call primary jobs that are, you know, perhaps bringing big companies from outside the community. But there is a definite partnership and correlation between the two. And then we have other objectives listed here that the council has approved or adopted. Explored opportunities to assist Texas Avenue. That's a major element of our comprehensive plan, and that's something that if you just drive down, you know that's a big challenge for us in the future. Other objectives under Research Valley Partnership, and again, we mentioned some of these already. Creation of new jobs, increasing property values, and then expansion. Why do we need economic development? Well, I would contend to say, and again, some may disagree with this, but any growth is not the best growth. Ad hoc growth means that, you know, if something happens, growth is okay, and that's good, you need it. But then if you have ad hoc growth, that means you may not have the infrastructure to sustain it over time. I had some weeds in my yard, unfortunately, you know, like everybody did 2 weeks ago. I had to apply a little, you know, both fertilizer as well as, you know, an herbicide, you know, to kind of bring down what I didn't want, but actually bring up what I do want. And I think that's a similar type of exercise that you look at when you look at how to manage growth. And again, those goals and objectives are critical. Tax base I mentioned already, and encouraging more private sector investment. You know, we are one of thousands of communities out there. You know, people are mobile, right? We're a very mobile community if you look at Bryan-College Station. And people have options to go wherever they want to go. We compete, whether we want to admit that or not, we compete with our communities, both in our region, both in our state, and outside the state. We like to think that we're very strategically located and we have a lot of things that other communities don't have, and that's true. But they have their strengths as well. We're in basically an arena of competition. And that's something that, you know, again, that's something to be cognizant of. Here are the primary players that I mentioned. Bryan City Council, BCD, which is Bryan Commerce and Development. That's an economic development arm of the City Council. Basically the same group of people. And basically they're a local government corporation, but are created as a legal entity to do economic development. And if you'll notice on agendas that are posted, you'll see one for Bryan City Council, but you might see something for Bryan Commerce and Development. That's the same group. But again, they work very closely on a number of our initiatives. I mentioned BBC. We have an entity called the Brazos County Economic Development Foundation, and that's the joint partnership between the City of Bryan and Brazos County on the development of the Texas Triangle Park. If you're familiar with Access Pipe and Tube, and we'll talk about that, that's on the north end of the city. That area is, again, really expanding with some new business, and we're excited about having them. But again, that's a partnership with the county, and that's the entity that runs it. Research Valley Partnership, again, I've mentioned them already, and Kevin will probably go into some detail on that. I'll also mention we as city staff are actively involved. Our role, however, is to provide information to the policymakers. Ultimately, it's the City Council, top of this list, that makes decisions on behalf of the City of Bryan. Other entities may have some, roles to play, including staff, but our job is to advise them on and making the best decisions on behalf of the citizens. And they are accountable to directly, of course, as all we are. Major partners, I mentioned Bryan ISD, Brazos County, and the City of College Station. We've grown together as a twin cities. So the City of College Station, in fact, we have agreements that we work together on, interlocal agreements, specifically for economic development. That was unheard of, by the way, a number of years ago, not that long ago. And then Texas A&M and Bryan-College, again, those being the higher education entities in our community. I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay at this time, and she'll walk us through some of the tools and give us some expertise.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joey. And thank you all again for being here today for the Lunch and Learn series. I have to just say that I've worked for both of these gentlemen at some point over the years. They are the best bosses I've ever had. They are the only bosses I've ever had, but definitely great to work with both of them. And I hit a button already. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about some of the tools that the City of Bryan utilizes to implement all of the policies and ideas that Joey just shared with you. And there are quite a few different tools. Like Joey mentioned, there is not a one-size-fits-all approach to economic development. For any given project, we may use 1, 2, 3 different tools to accomplish what. And it really, again, just depends on what we're trying to accomplish and what the type of development is. So the items listed on the board are probably the more common tools that we utilize: tax increment financing through the creation of our reinvestment zones. I would say probably statewide, that's one of the most popular forms of economic development tools. We utilize Chapter 380s, tax abatements, performance agreements, and we're going to get into each one of these a little bit more and talk to you about what they are. And then I have other, because there's quite a few other different types, everything from the utilization of hotel occupancy funds to interlocal agreements, and a variety of other different tools. But we're going to focus mainly on those 4. And I'm going to start with the tax increment reinvestment zones. And basically, the concept is to take a snapshot of a particular area that is defined by ordinance, and basically look at what the total taxable value in that zone is at the time the area is created. And then as the area develops, anything above and beyond that, any additional taxable value that's created in that zone can be utilized for projects within the zone. We're going to go through each one of the TERS, and you'll see the wide variety of things that we utilize TERS funds for. One thing I want to note, I'm going to talk to you about the 4 existing TERS. Over the life of the City of Bryan utilizing TERS, we've actually had 5. The first TERS in the City of Bryan is what we call TERS 8, which is the Park Hudson area off of University Drive in Copperfield. An extremely successful TERS, in so much that we closed it down several years early. We amended the project. We took care of multiple projects, everything from the participation in Copperfield to land for the school, the dog park, the light at University Drive in Copperfield, and in the end had money that went back to the taxing entities involved. And again, we were able to shut that one down early. So definitely a success story, and hopefully, and you have to realize that the TERS have a very long lifespan. We're talking about when you enter into a TERS, you're looking at 25 years before you realize the full potential of that area. So hopefully, in the next 15 to 20 years, we're saying the same thing about all of these zones. But I'll talk to you a little bit about the 4 that we have active right now. All right, what am I doing now? You told me how to do this, and now I forgot. How'd you? Which one?
It's okay, when I get up, I usually break it, so.
So I'm going to go in order of the numbering. TERS 10, which was the second TERS that we created, which we refer to as traditions, although it is more than just the traditions development within this area, but that is what this area is known for. This is a little bit of a unique project in that not only does it include multiple economic development tools such as Chapter 380s, development agreements, tax abatements, and tax rebates, it also includes a unique partnership, and that is a development partnership between the City of Bryan, Bryan Commerce and Development, and the Traditions Acquisition Partnership. So this is, the City of Bryan actually actively participates as a development partner in Traditions and receives, we have obligations under that agreement, and we do receive revenues as the lots in Traditions develop. So it's a little bit different of an arrangement than our other TERS, but has up to this date been very successful. And all you can see that in bold midway through the screen, the TERS 10 was created in 2001, and the base value at that time was about $637,000. In 2014, the net taxable value was at almost $179 million. So you can see over the life of the TERS how much this area has grown, and we are estimating that when the TERS is closed out, the City of Bryan General Fund will probably receive about $5 million in tax revenue annually from the TERS. Couple big projects that I want to note going on in Traditions right now. And I also want to point out that Traditions does include two components. The Traditions that you hear of under that name is the residential component. And some of you might have heard of Atlas, which is the new component in the area, is the commercial component to this development. Couple of exciting projects going on in the area. One is the Mature Well Facility. That's the partnership between St. Joseph, the Health Science Center, and Traditions for a senior community that's being built out there, a senior wellness facility that's being built out there. The park, PARC, has also broke ground in Traditions, and that's the new senior living community that will be housed just up the street from the Mature Well facility. And then the Stella Hotel, which is the 177 key room hotel that I think they probably hit the 4th or 5th level in construction last week. So lots of exciting development going on out there, all as a result of the creation of the TERS and some of the economic development agreements we've been able to put together. Next is what we call Nash Street. This is by the post office on William J. Bryan. And this TERS was created primarily to assist with the extension of Nash Street as a public safety issue. The area in front of in front of the post office on William J. Bryan used to have one of our highest accident ratings in the City of Bryan, and the city and the county who partnered on this TERS saw the need to get Nash Street in, get the signal in, and so that was the reason that this TERS was created. Certainly there have been other benefits. You're starting to see a lot more development in this particular area. The car wash, there's been a new convenience store, and probably most noticeably the multi-story apartment complex is going on in this area. So this is a great example of how we can use economic development tools for public safety. And there's just a few figures. The base year on this was 2005 with a taxable value of $2.2 million, and as of 2014 we're looking at a little over $23 million. TERS 21, which is downtown. This TERS is, and like I said, all of these are a little bit different in how they're set up and a little bit different in how they're administered. This TERS actually does not have any debt. All of the improvements that were done in downtown, phase 1 and phase 2 infrastructure, were funded outside the TERS through other bonds and general fund sources. So this TERS actually right now has available fund balance that can be used for other types of projects within the zone. And right now, the main project we have going on within this TERS that we're using these funds for is the Downtown Improvement Program, which is a matching grant facade program that we're utilizing to help businesses in downtown restore their facades or make improvements to their facades. We funded $100,000 worth of downtown improvement programs last fiscal year, and we're taking another $100,000 in requests to council in April. So this is a very successful program. We've actually been funding this program since, I think, 2001, but the early years, this program was funded out of the general fund. And now because we have the TERS, we're able to utilize TERS funds that are generated through the development of these properties to go back into the DIP program. So we no longer utilize general fund dollars to fund this program. This is also a good example. You'll notice in base year 2006, the taxable value is 41 million, and today it's 57 million. So over the life of the TERS, we've only captured about $15 million. This is a good example of why you try to create a TERS before your investment begins to occur, so you can capture more of that taxable value to utilize for projects. By the time this TERS was created, the city had already put in a substantial investment into downtown. The redevelopment had already started to occur. So had we been able to get this TERS in a few years earlier, you would see more dollars available in this fund to utilize for projects. But nonetheless, you can see in the far right column that we will still have a substantial amount to work with over the years, about 2.2 million in increased value in this zone. There's a lot of exciting things going on in downtown North, and Joey's going to visit with you about that a little bit later in the presentation. And again, another example of how we utilize multiple different tools within a TERS. And finally, we have TERS 22, which is originally was called the Target Bryan Town Center TERS, and was expanded to include Park Harrison. The original site is everything on the south side of Briarcrest, and the purpose of that TERS was to incentivize Target to come to the City of Bryan. Once Target came, we experienced some tough times in the economy and things slowed down. But if you're out and about in that area, you'll notice that things are starting to pick up. Lamar Companies, who is managing those properties right now, are actively leasing those properties. There is a hotel under construction right now. The retail spaces are being expanded on the Target side, and as well as continued development on the expanded side, which is what we call the Park Harrison side. That's where you'll see the McDonald's, the Taco Casa, several hotels. And that has continued to develop at a steady pace since it was added to the area. And base year on this one, the taxable value is 2.4 million, and we're looking at a net taxable value now of about 34 million. That is it for the TERS. We could go on probably just an hour talking about that, and Joey's going to hit some other items that are in the TERS. But one of the other agreements we wanted to talk to you a little bit about is Chapter 380 agreements. And these are probably, I'd say, the second most popular tool that we utilize at the City of Bryan. And it's called a Chapter 380 simply because it's referring to Chapter 380 of the Local Government Code, which authorizes the city to utilize these types of agreements. And there is an enormous amount of flexibility in a Chapter 380. They can be utilized for everything from fee waivers to sale of property at a discounted rate, tax rebates. There's really just a lot of different options that you can use a Chapter 380 for. And you don't have to use it for just one of those. You can combine multiple of those options in one agreement. 380s can also be used within a TERS. So they're not limited to properties outside of TERS. So you may see in some cases where You're using a Chapter 380 and a tax abatement all within a TER zone. So again, enormous amount of flexibility with Chapter 380s. And we're going to talk a little bit later about a couple of examples that we have going on right now. One I do want to mention is the Builder Incentive Program. Some of you may have heard about a program that we've had in place, how long has it been in place? 2 years now. And basically, a couple years ago, the Bryan City Council recognized a need for us to, one, start to see an increase in our residential building permits, and two, target a specific square footage that we were hearing that there just wasn't enough supply of, and that's the 2,200 to 3,000 square feet. So we have a Chapter 380 agreement that allows the city to waive fees when a builder comes in for permits for that size of home construction. So just, I think one of the many exciting programs that we utilize the Chapter 380 for. And again, we'll talk a little bit later about some other specific projects that we're using Chapter 380s for. Kevin? Yep.
Oh, come on.
Howdy. Well, we heard that a lot this morning. We went to an exciting thing this morning, Wayfair. Came to the City of Bryan, and we'll get to one of those in a minute. There's actually an example of a property that is used again and again, even when something fails, how it can be used as something positive. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Kevin Russell with the City of Bryan. Joey gave me an introduction earlier. He was pretty nice, and he just said I was kind of the oldest one. And yeah. I have to tell you that some of the things we're going to talk about in a minute, Mr. Gehring was heavily involved in when he was working with the BBC. So the ones that he was involved in, I'll be sure and say he was part of it. And then y'all can blame him if you don't like it. So, but tax abatements are something that the local government code gives us the authority, the municipality's authority to enter into. And as Lindsay mentioned earlier, they can be coupled with other types of agreements. The most common thing for tax abatements to be coupled with are Chapter 380 agreements. And what we do in many cases is we will use a Chapter 380 agreement to either reimburse or rebate fees for such as permits, or abate, not abate, but waive fees and things like that. There's a few other things that it can be used for, but that's the most common with tax abatements and 380s. That's pretty common. The City of Bryan, well, 10 years is the maximum it can go. The City of Bryan looks at holding it to a 7-year abatement and not going to the 10 years. Now, I'm going to tell you, if a billion-dollar company comes in and it's going to be very beneficial to the City of Bryan and it's something that's clean and everybody wants, they may go to 10 years. You know, so but we look at 7, and the other thing we look at is we want to make sure that what is abated is less than what we received over the term of the abatement. Now, does that make sense to everyone? So if we're going to abate, if you have 100% of the tax, we want to make sure that we're receiving 51% over that time that the abatement's in place. So we never want to give away or abate more than what we receive. Every one of our agreements are performance-based, and we do compliance checks. Now, the RVP is our partner in a lot of the tax abatements, and they will perform the initial compliance review, and then it's up to us to kind of check to make sure that we agree with what they have found before the City Council makes a determination on whether or not they're going to abate the taxes or not. Typically, some of the things that we look for in each agreement is the improvement value. So it's not what's invested, it's what's actually going to be on the appraisal district tax rolls. We want to know that, because you can invest. Anyone who's been in development knows that you can spend, you know, $100,000 on a project, and when the appraisal district goes out and values it, it may only value at $80,000. And if your abatement is based off of $100,000, you're going to lose money. You are going lose money if we abated off of that. So we only abate on what's on the tax roll. That's what we're interested in. The other things we look at is jobs, how many, and what's the average salary. What we're always trying to do is we're trying to raise the minimum wage for the county. What we like to look at is to qualify for a tax abatement. Not always, but we want it to be around 10% above the county's average wage. So right now we're looking at somewhere between a minimum salary between $40,000 and $42,000. You know, that's an average over ever how many jobs we have. Hope I go the right way. Nope. Oh, was that right? Oh, it was. Performance agreements. And you'll notice that this authority is given out of a different chapter. And by the way, we'll have some examples of tax abatements, 380s, and actual agreements, and probably some names of companies that y'all will recognize. This is performance agreements are the authorities given out of the local government code also. I won't go into a lot of this other than these agreements do not go to council. They're handled through a development corporation, which Bryan Commerce and Development is. And it works similar to a Chapter 380 agreement. And the example that Lindsay told me about is if you guys are familiar with the Ice House at Main and MLK. The Ice House was owned by BCD. BCD, I'm going to say this probably the wrong way, but just let me finish it and maybe it'll sound right. We gave the property to a developer, knowing that there's probably more than $1 million worth of improvements that needs to be done. If those improvements don't happen, they don't meet that threshold, BCD gets the property back. Is that correct? Pretty much. You can clarify in a minute. So, okay, so here are some examples. I got this, right? Okay, here's some examples on I'm going to talk about these two first. Gunler Foods and Pincrow. Did all you guys remember Gunler Foods? And you remember it was pretty much a failure, right? Right. But what the City of Bryan did in this particular agreement, now this is in the Triangle Park, what the City of Bryan did is entered into a non-annexation agreement with Gunler Foods. That's all the City of Bryan, that was their involvement other than a driveway and I think okay. Other than this is in the Triangle Park. Here's your Triangle Park in this area right here. So we did driveways and a big water meter. They failed, and since they failed, we've got a new business in that building. They vacated another building, which allows a new business to move in. So just because one fails doesn't mean that it was a total failure. That business failed, but the fact that there's a infrastructure there in water, sewer, and building means that we can use that to recruit new businesses. Hope I go the right way. Nope. Pincrow. Do you guys remember Pincrow? Okay. Do you remember Decision One? Call center. Okay. That little arrow right there is where we were this morning. That is where Wayfair is located today. So that building's been turned over, I know, for the third time at least. Decision One didn't make it. Pincrow didn't make it. Wayfair is in there. And I think Wayfair is going to do pretty good, and I think they'll make it. But Pincrow invested about $1 million in equipment to go into that location. The city did offer an abatement for that $1 million worth of investment. And they had a certain salary or a certain number of employees they were supposed to have. They were in compliance up until the last year. They failed. They were told they were not in compliance, and I don't know if they were, basically what they owed in taxes was about $1,500. So let me go to the next one. Is this, nope, I went the wrong way again. I think this is you, right? Yep.
Yes. So the two items that Kevin just talked about are examples of how things didn't quite work out how we anticipated in the beginning, but in both cases have turned into a success story. And I think that's one important thing to note with economic development is there is always a risk. We don't have a crystal ball, so we have to take the information that we have at the time and the studies that we do at the time with the realization that sometimes things change. The economy changes, the dynamics of the business change, technology changes, but hopefully, as Kelvin just illustrated, we try to turn those few situations that don't quite work out into something positive for the community. So we now have a list of a few projects that are new, that have been around for many years that have been very successful, just to show you the different types of examples of these agreements. We're going to have to move through this pretty quickly because we want to give you time to ask some questions and we're running out of time. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about Oakmont, which is a residential development. Some of you might have heard about this on the news because it does involve the extension of University Drive, where it currently terminates with FM 158 or Boonville. So this project was done and would not have been successful or not have been possible without the use of a Chapter 380 agreement. And that 380 agreement allows the City of Bryan, in partnership with the Adam Development Corporation, to extend University Drive to make not only this development possible, but other developments along University Drive. And they receive from the City of Bryan a rebate in the taxes that their development generates. And in exchange, the City of Bryan and taxpayers receive a minimum guaranteed value by the end of the project, which is $25 million, which, by the way, is probably very conservative estimate for this project. But it's an example that shows you they need something to get the development started. They have to promise something to the city in the end. And then there are provisions in that development agreement that basically say if you don't hit that value and you don't perform the way you say you're going to do, then you have to pay back any taxes that we've rebated to you over the years. So that's an example and one of the most current examples of a Chapter 380 agreement. And I'm not going to talk a lot about this one because we've already talked about traditions. Again, lots of different examples going on within that development. So I'm going to skip over this one and let Kevin go ahead and go into a few of his. I did want to make one clarification on the Ice House agreement. It is, like he stated, the building was gifted with a requirement that they invest $2.5 million into the property. If they don't meet that, then they pay a penalty. And what most likely would happen at that point, if they're not investing the $2.5 million, probably means they're out of money. Probably means that they would not have the funds to pay that penalty. So then we would enter into a negotiation with them to get the building back as part of the settlement for that penalty. So that's how that project works. But I'm happy to report that things are going very well with that project. If you have a chance to drive by and see what's going on, it looks incredible inside. So at this point, I don't have any concern that they're not going to meet that minimum investment, but I just wanted to clarify that one.
What is it, Texas?
The Ice House is what we call the bookend to downtown North. It's the at MLK and Bryan. In Maine. I'm sorry, Maine.
MLK and
In Maine. If you're driving down Maine, you would run into the building.
He has a map, he can point.
We'll show you a map.
Yeah.
Rudder's Landing. Dennis will remember this one. This is Rudder's Landing. I need to make a point of clarification here. This particular agreement was a Chapter 380 agreement. It was not with Walmart. There's a misnomer out there that thinks that the City of Bryan entered into an agreement with Walmart. We did not. We entered into an agreement with a developer, Lovett Commercial. Lovett Commercial promised to build a shopping center. Walmart was their anchor. And we entered into this particular Chapter 380 agreement was to rebate sales tax. They had to generate sales tax so we could rebate it. There was an offset that we used in there. We didn't want this particular development to take away from the Walmart sales tax on Briarcrest. If that Walmart loses sales tax and it goes to the Walmart at Rudder's Landing, then they get less. But that was the agreement with that. But the agreement was not with Walmart, it was with the developer. Okay. Tejas Center. Now that's probably one of the first redevelopments that I know of, that I was involved in the city. And many of you will remember that as the Manor East Mall. And really and truly, we didn't have to do a whole lot in that particular project to make it happen, other than put a creek underground. And that actually used the drainage and transportation fee, because there was a drainage easement that went through that property. We used that money to put the creek underground, and now there's parking over it. But the creek runs right behind, I don't know the name of the, Las Mocahettings, I think, and Hastings, right behind there, and goes in front of the old Walmart. What we found from that, and I know I need to speed up, so I'll speed up. What we found from that is, if you look across the street from the Tejas Center, there's a bunch of redevelopment going on. So Realm Realty has bought properties and they're redeveloping. Access Pipe and Tube, I won't spend a lot of time on it. They're about 10 acres under roof. And I do have some notes that I can tell you, but I can't read. So they've invested around $200 million in buildings and equipment on that property. They have hired about 145 people at this time, and all of them are making somewhere between $38,000 and $40,000, or average of $38,000 to $40,000 a year, and they're very successful. And we actually hope that the oil prices go up a little bit, and those guys will get much busier. But that's been a very, very successful venture so far. What we did in that place, or in this particular area, since it's not in our city limits, is we entered into a non-annexation agreement with them. And I think the important thing, thank you, the important thing is that we receive what's called a pilot. That's payment in lieu of taxes. They pay us 50% of what they would normally pay us in taxes if they were in the city. They pay us that for police and fire coverage. So the city's doing really well. So if we never get any police calls or calls for a fire, you know, we're in pretty good shape. And this is another one that is near and dear to Dennis's heart. Coulter Airfield. Many times people don't realize what an economic development tool General Aviation Airport is. Luckily, when Dennis was on the BBC, he did. And the BBC has invested quite a bit of money in the airport. They built a hangar, they paid for a business plan, and they paid for an weather operating, or AWOS, which is the automated weather operating system. So you get current weather, thunderstorms, and all these things that emergency services can use. So the BBC did it because it's a benefit to the community. I'll also have a couple of things. The TxDOT Aviation does a economic impact of general aviation airports every 5 years, so we should receive a new one this year from the TxDOT. And what I want you to look at is right here, and that's direct and indirect impacts in 2011. So if you look, there's employment, there's salary and benefits, and economic activity that occurs because that airport is there. If it wasn't there, we wouldn't have it. I can tell you that the numbers are going to be much greater now. We've increased our number of base jets by 2, and we've probably, I think we're close to 80 based aircraft at that airport. So it's successful, and we're continuing to want to use it more as an economic development tool to attract businesses here. Joey?
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Lindsay, I will just say, and we're going to try to wrap it up pretty quickly here. There are those projects that are critical, as I'll call them catalysts, and that is they start something, not just the project itself, but they grow whatever's around it. They have a ripple effect, if you will, on adjacent development. If you've been here for any period of time and you've seen major or any project that goes in, there are those projects that do influence what happens in the surrounding area. And it's critical for us to be involved okay, what are those strategic projects that will lead to something else? To quote a friend of mine who's sitting here as well, and we've been referring to him, success breeds success, right, Dennis? Yes. And that's the whole premise behind a successful development, economic development program, is what is it that you can do that will lead to further growth over time. I'm going to point you to a couple of redevelopments, or really this is one kind of, I'll refer to it as kind of small in area really, but the South College corridor has some challenges just like some of our older parts of town. Older infrastructure, and then some dilapidated apartments and houses and, and I guess distressed properties. We were approached and were able to partner several years ago with Twin City Properties, who was coming in and buying the old Bryan Arms apartments. And in fact, I have a picture, wanted to insert it here, and this is from Google Street View from 2007 of the front of that apartment complex. It was it was a difficulty from the public safety standpoint, okay, from the City of Bryan's point of view. But approached us about partnership. We did a Chapter 380 agreement, which is a reimbursement agreement over a 7-year period, $80,000 max, whichever he reached first. But he had to actually increase the value of these properties, and there's several others besides this apartment complex, that he had to achieve a $1 million tax value increase. And after that was eligible for reimbursement from actual taxes collected in that increase only, not in the base value that was there before. So we're not losing what was the already existing condition. It's only what's been added and it was eligible to receive a reimbursement back on that. What that led to are a number of other projects in that surrounding area. I'll point to you, these are some other homes. This is the 2007 and then 2012 view. But again, those types of projects lead to other types of developments that occur in the area. So we want to work with those who are willing to take that risk. I'm willing to put their investment, their private investment in it. And what that means is that it's incentive, and that allows for other things to start happening. We want to try to find a way to spur private development. Again, as I mentioned before, it's critical. The city can't just work in a vacuum. I'm going to talk about downtown North, and Lindsay Gindy is really the one who needs to be talking about this because she has been critically involved in a number of elements here. But this is just a view, and you asked about the Ice House location. This is Main Street and Bryan Avenue. Ice House is on the north end. Our downtown Bryan is not your typical downtown square with a courthouse in the middle. It's two streets that go about 12 blocks long, and there's some challenges because it's split in half by a state road. And so that north end was a completely different project. But I'll look at downtown Bryan as a catalyst. The LaSalle Hotel. If the city didn't step in and work with the developer, acquire that bomb shelter in 1997, there would not have been any other investment, I can assure you, in that surrounding area. Renovating the old Carnegie Library, renovating the Palace Theater. Those types of things happened on the south end. The north end, it had to do with assembling property and taking away those obstacles for redevelopment. So you see some other things happening. Lindsay's been very involved in these. 500 Bryan North, that's a development with 46 new residential units with garden courtyard areas for tenants and customers, 10,000 square feet of leasable commercial space, and $5 million in added taxable value over 4 phases. The Jordan Center, that's a 2-block section, and if you're familiar with the Kimball Feed building, you can kind of see it here. It's kind of a neat, it was an industrial type building. They're actually going to utilize that for a restaurant, but they're also going to be doing a number of things, and that is a 5-story, 260,000 square foot mixed use development, very urban, okay? It's going to look very urban in style. 91 new residential units. It'll have its own parking garage of 175 parking spaces, $25 million in added taxable value. I mentioned the new restaurant, art gallery, and then retail space on the ground floor. We have the farmers market located. So all these things, what are those catalysts? Again, we want to create that value. So the surrounding blocks, there's obviously opportunities that people are beginning to see. We're getting calls weekly and multiple times a week, those who are interested in coming into downtown Bryan. I want to end with, and I know we don't have a whole lot of time, we're right at 1 o'clock. When we talk about what has happened over a 25-year period, we mentioned 25 years, sort of the period of time. And again, it's remarkable. This is really a qualitative illustration, but really, it'll give you a vision of what it looked like in 1990 in downtown Bryan. If you know who Lyle Lovett is, and if you knew who he was at that time, he did a music video called "This Old Porch." Here we are. I could go on and show you this, but I invite you to go and look at it. I don't have a whole lot of time to go through it. I'm going to end with one quantitative.
You mentioned Fibertown because they were
Fibertown.
the catalyst that really turned
Another
this
catalyst
around.
mentioned is, and that's a good point, is the technology side. We have technology in downtown Bryan, located along major railroads that includes fiber optic connectivity, and has led to some technology companies, such as a major Tier 4 data center. Fibertown has grown. So we're not just talking about, your traditional downtown redevelopment. It has so many elements to it. And again, that has attracted interest from Fortune 500 companies who locate their systems in downtown Bryan. But a number of things have happened, and we could go on and on about it. I will end with really a kind of another picture of what what the city of Bryan. This is the look at downtown Bryan today, and you all know what it looks like. So I don't have to necessarily show you photographs. And they lived happily ever after with the Queen. But I'll just end with this. This is a picture of that same, again, if you see that video, and again, if I could make it bigger for you, you could see what was going on in the background. That was the main point. And that is, there wasn't a whole lot happening, okay, in the city of Bryan in 1990. Our population, we were 55,000. That was good. We were still receiving some growth at that time. Our total assessed valuation was about $1.2 billion. Seems like a big number, right? Okay, and then our property tax revenue, a little over $6.9 million. Sales tax revenue, $4.4 million. Look at where we are today. I will tell you that's not by accident. We're at 82,000. That's our estimate. I'm rounding it off, but that's where our current population is. About a third of the city has been added over the 25 years. That's about a third growth. We're now at $5.7 billion in total assessed valuation. Property tax revenue, you can see that, over triple, or almost triple. We've got, again, growth in sales tax from $4.4 million to over $17 million in revenues. I wanted to give you some quantitative evidence of the health of our community and where we've come. But I'm going to stop there, and I appreciate you all coming today, and we're going to take some time for questions.